Welcome back. My guest is retired county court judge Charles Apotheker, who's got a great book, Social Worker with a 2x4, and we're going to be discussing his book and his work as first assistant district attorney as well. Welcome, Judge.
Thank you. Thank you.
So, Judge, had the opportunity to get this book just recently, and I thought you would be an absolutely wonderful guest for us to be able to speak with. You've got a richness of service to our community, and the book itself is really priceless. I've gotten through most of it, some really great stories of recovery and hope, and you have a fascinating life story as well. So maybe we could just dive into that a little bit, if you don't mind, Judge. Give us a little bit about your background, how long you've been living in Rockland.
Mm-hmm. Well, as many, I was a Bronx kid, educated in the public schools in the Bronx, grew up first a block north of the Sedgwick projects near University Avenue, projects that produced Judge Garvey and Judge Berliner, which I didn't know until much later in my life. We were there at a different time, but they grew up in the projects there too. And I also lived in the Marshallou Parkway area near DeWitt Clinton, where I went to high school. As I said in the book, if you would have told me that someday when I was 15 years old or 16 years old that I would have become a judge someday, that was as likely as my becoming first baseman for the New York Yankees. That was not in my picture at all. I didn't know what I wanted to be, but certainly wasn't gravitating towards that area. But I attended City College, Baruch, which was part of City College, and I worked for the post office after school. I would go out to Flushing, Queens, and drive a mail truck afternoons, weekends, and evenings. Met a lot of interesting people along the way, and worked with people from every ethnic background. And went to high school with people from every ethnic background at that time in the Bronx. We moved up here in 1972. I was in law school at the time at St. John's. Had Mario Cuomo as one of my professors. Very tough professor. You had to be prepared for him. And we lived in Suffern at the time. My sister actually got me to come up here. She was involved politically in the town of Ramapo at the time. And it was her that opened some doors for me. After I moved in and after I graduated from law school, I was appointed as an assistant county attorney. I was hired by the first female county attorney, Diana Reve, and continued working in the county attorney's office until 2003. I was lucky enough to take part in what we call the public defender case in 1977. Two assistant public defenders were discharged claiming their political affiliation that denied them rehiring by a new administration that came in. Most of our seasoned lawyers were busy with more important things like a CSEA strike that happened right at the same time. And so the county attorney at the time, Mark Paris, designated myself and Elon Schoenberger to go down to federal district court and try this case. And with the understanding that, what do you mean politics can't be involved in the selection of people working for the county? That's crazy. It always was. Why should this be any different? The judge on the case was Vincent Broderick, who I later found out was not rehired by Mayor Lindsay. He was the police commissioner of the city of New York under Mayor Wagner, and in the mid-60s he was denied reappointment for political reasons. So we did not have a judge on the case that was going to favor our side, and not that the case would have been decided any differently by any other judge. We lost at in the federal district court. We took an appeal to the circuit. We lost there, and we decided to see if we can seek certiorari from the U.S. Supreme Court, and we did. And we worked on the brief for the whole summer, And Mark Paris and I went to Washington in early December of 1979 and watched a few cases being argued, and then it was our turn. And it was an amazing experience to sit there and watch both Mark and Dave Wagner, who was on the other side, late Dave Wagner. I didn't think, when we left, my feet didn't touch the floor. I was just amazed watching people like Thurgood Marshall and Warren Burger and those folks on the Supreme Court at that time.
And you have a great picture of that as well.
Yeah.
You know, that you came over years, that came to, I guess, years later, you know,
Yeah,
outside the court.
Yeah, we took pictures of each other on the steps, and they were lost. I didn't know where they were. I kept looking for them, and it turned out they were slides that I found about 10 years ago and looked at them, and they said, this could be it. It had a date of January 1980 on them. Everybody used slides in those days, right? And I went to a place in Westwood to try to do something with them because they were very dark, and that was the reason why they were never developed, because they were pitch black.
Right.
It was a late afternoon in the winter, and the sun had gone down behind that big building. But we have those pictures now, and it's just a great memory.
And that's got to be a highlight as well. Just any attorney, you know, ultimately, you know, going to the Supreme Court and participating in a case before the court. So it's and you were able to do that early on in your career.
Yeah, 33 years old.
Yeah.
But right before that was my election as town judge.
Mm-hmm.
And in fact, Mark Paris used that appointment as some evidence of people starting in lower level positions like assistant county attorney, like assistant public defender, and moving on to other things, and he introduced me to the court. My associate, Charles Apotheker, was just elected as a town judge, and they all looked at me. Half expected them to invite me up and take a seat, right? So that was special for me as well. So, Election Day 1980, I was elected as town judge and re-elected 7 times, including a write-in campaign in 1983, the second time I ran, which was another exciting experience, having to campaign when not on the ballot. But was re-elected and served for 27 years, had an interesting career as a town judge as well.
And then after you became it went all the way through your career as a town judge, ultimately you also ran for county court judge, correct?
Yes, I did, in a 4-way primary with Judge Alfieri, Judge Warren, and Tom Walsh. And Judge Alfieri and I were the one who successfully won that Democratic primary, and we won the election in 2006 and started taking office in January '07. And at that time, the administrative judge was Judge Nicolai, Francis Nicolai. I had seen him a week or two before Election Day, and I said to him, listen, you know, if I get elected, I'd like to get the drug court back, because I did it as a misdemeanor, on the misdemeanor level in the town of Haverstraw. We were the second local court to host the drug court. In the late 90s, the county went out for a grant to see if we could start a drug court in Rockland County, a misdemeanor level drug court. It was brand new at the time up here in the Hudson Valley. Very few drug courts in New York at the time, one in Brooklyn and in some other bigger locations, but not in the Hudson Valley. And it started right here in the town of Clarkstown with Craig Johns. And I was vociferously against it. People tease me about that now, that I railed against it publicly. I thought, I pictured drug court as a bunch of drug addicts sitting in a circle with a judge in the middle with a guitar playing Kumbaya. You know, that was my picture in my mind of drug court. And so it changed when I went to a graduation with Judge Johns, and this happened in 1999, and so I watched a woman who had lost her children to foster care because of her drug addiction graduate, get her children back. I said to myself, maybe there's something to this. Maybe I should not be so stubborn and take a look at it. And I did, and then when the 2 years were up with Judge Johns, I offered myself up to bring it to the town of Haverstraw. And I remember having a conversation, it's in my book too.
Yeah,
with,
it's great. You were around page 67 or so, you were actually talking about why you were against and how you ultimately became educated. But I was kind of chuckling at that because talking to the town supervisor, you referenced that in the book.
Right, yeah, I did. And he was, you're going to bring these people into the town of Haverstraw? And I said, Mr. Supervisor, these people are your neighbors and your friends, maybe some of your family. They're here already. We don't have to bring anybody in. They're already here. And so we started the misdemeanor drug court in Haverstraw. It was very successful. We helped a lot of people. Some we couldn't help. You know, I refer to what we do in drug court as fairy dust, which is a simplistic way of talking about all the research that has been done over the years in brain disease and mental illness and how that affects addiction. But that's what we called it, at least I called it. We sprinkle it on everybody in drug court. Mm-hmm. Some of it sticks and some of it doesn't. Right. And,
you Judge, the book is fascinating. Before we kind of dive into that, I would be remiss if I didn't at least just ask. I mean, you do some self-disclosure in the book, which I have to imagine that this, was a real process for you. But you talk a bit about, your family and what have you. But mm-hmm. you also talk about a painful, or at least reference a painful experience that took place with Dr. Archambault.
Yes. He was a recognized pediatric endocrinologist. He was world famous at the Rockefeller University. And he treated mostly boys, but some girls too, when they weren't growing properly. They didn't seem to be growing when they should. And so at the time I was about 13 years old, my parents were concerned about that and took me to this particular doctor. And I went to him twice, and I had really buried what he had done to me and many hundreds, if not thousands, of other young boys and some girls as well, with the cover of, treating this problem. And so I buried it for years and years and years. I never told my parents, never told anyone. And I disclosed it publicly in June of 2019 by having an interview with the Journal News. Nancy Cutler did an interview. It was front page. I decided at my age I had nothing to be ashamed of. I wouldn't have had anything to be ashamed of anyway. It was done to me, not by me. And so I felt if it could help other people who were dealing with this, it would be a good idea. In October of 2018, I came home from vacation to receive a letter from Rockefeller University saying that they were looking into Dr. Archibald, who is long dead at least 10 years. And I was curious, so I called these people at Rockefeller, and they asked me what I remembered. And it all came back to me. Not the abuse, but everything up to that point. But it was clear as day, and it was almost 60 years later. Mm. And I didn't remember ever leaving the room. I remembered everything about going into the hospital and seeing the doctor and some of the informal things that he did, posing me for pictures naked, which he did with every one of these people. But the abuse that others had verified was something that I put away in a tight box, and still don't remember exactly what he did, but I'm sure that he didn't look at me and say, you know, I better not abuse this 13-year-old because he's going to be a judge someday, right? I was just another 13-year-old boy.
Yeah. One of the things in your recounting of that, you talk about the permission slip that that your mother signed,
Right.
and it was really, you kind of term it was a sick trick because it gave the authority for him to perform even minor procedures.
Right.
So it really kind of gave him the cover of authority to be able to, do the unthinkable.
Right. And there were two things that after this was all uncovered, which was just a few weeks after I was contacted by the hospital, the New York Times broke the story about Dr. Archibald, and the story that I had told the people at the hospital a few weeks before was exactly the same story that hundreds, if not thousands, of people had told about the same process that he used. And what concerned me, and still does quite a bit, is that if my parents had lived to see this, and as a parent and grandparent now, the biggest duty that you have as a parent is to protect your child. And they would have been racked with guilt about allowing this to happen, and in not knowing what would happen, but still in all allowing it to happen to their son. And that, and the fact that no one has ever discovered the pictures, the thousands and thousands of pictures he took of naked boys and girls. So,
well, Judge, thank you for sharing that, because it takes a lot of courage, and with the changes that have taken place over the last couple of years now, with the opening up of the statute of limitations, allowing the Child Victims Act for people to be able to go back and in some way try and grapple with this. And you tell the story 60 years later, you had repressed it, buried it, how that affected you throughout your life. Certainly it's something that will always be a part of you, and thank you for the courage in sharing that. And
it did affect, in some ways, subconsciously, my dealing with people in drug court who were abused. And I recall one young man who since passed away of an overdose, who in drug court we would call people up, especially in the first time, and I would ask them a couple of questions about what their drug of choice was, how long they were addicted. This young man came up right away and said, and I was abused by a priest at 8 years old, which was not something we were used to hearing in front of a courtroom full of people.
Right.
We referred to it as too much information, right? I didn't know how to react to it. And yet I always felt, even though I didn't know at the time or repressed all of this, something different from the people, both men and women, who were abused, and which caused their addiction. Many times people do use to forget things, and especially trauma, and sexual trauma is right at the top of the list, especially for females.
Right.
So I didn't realize it at the time, but there was sort of a different way of looking at that than I might have had if I wasn't a victim of it myself.
That's a very powerful lead-in into what really kind of became a hallmark of your work, the drug court. And so maybe just by way of reference, you do a really nice job of talking about where drug court really kind of came from. Janet Reno back in 1988.
Yeah.
Down in Dade County, and they were kind of tired of the revolving door of people coming into court, and they were looking for some type of alternative to the process. Maybe you could just speak to drug court in general and the process that's involved.
It is a different kind of court, and it's not a kumbaya court by any means.
Which is kind of funny, because initially that's what you were thinking, right?
Yep.
You know?
I didn't know what to think, but I didn't think it was serious. And you accept people. First, you go through a process of making sure that they have an addiction, doing the kinds of evaluations that you need to do to see that. They have to be charged with a crime, misdemeanor or a felony. It doesn't have to relate directly to their addiction. They could be charged with criminal trespass, criminal mischief, or possession of drugs, or forgeries, for example, forging prescription pads, which I get into in the book with the last story. So we accept the person in. They plead guilty to the charge, whether it's a misdemeanor or a felony. And if it's a misdemeanor and they don't successfully complete a one-year program in the misdemeanor court, they go to jail for up to 1 year. With the felonies, they face state prison of all different kinds of times, you know, different lengths of times. And so the judge has a powerful weapon, which I refer to as that 2x4. The drug court judge, an experienced drug court judge, would every once in a while remind them when they weren't doing well about the kind of sentence that they face. And so in felony drug court, it's 1.5 years. They have to be in treatment for much of that time. Sometimes they have to go away for treatment, inpatient treatment. Most times it's different kinds of outpatient treatment. We have a number of great treatment agencies. We're blessed in Rockland County, Nyack Hospital, Lexington, and Daytop, all great treatment agencies, Mental Health Association as well. They come to court every week or every other week. We know exactly what they've been up to. We get reports from treatment. I used to tell them that it's not like Las Vegas. What goes on in treatment doesn't stay in treatment. Doesn't go out to the world, but it does come to us. We get the treatment reports. If you've not been coming, if you've been disruptive, I was the muscle. I would dealt out punishment, whether it came with sitting in a county court jury box watching people being sent to prison by county court judges, or doing sheriff's work release on the weekend, or a couple of days in jail, or more than a couple of days in jail, depending on the seriousness of their offense. We use those tools to motivate people. That's sort of the negative motivation. But the positive motivation was when someone was doing well, we'd have phases. They would move from one phase to the other. And at that time, we would give them a phase certificate. And I would get off the bench and hand them the phase certificate. Everyone in the courtroom would applaud. And I would shake their hand and tell them that they'd really done a great job. For people who had never had anybody in their life compliment them or give them a pat on the back, this was a big thing for them. And that was the positive motivation. Sometimes movie tickets, sometimes we would get offers from nail salons for the women to get their nails done. Things, small tokens, just to show them that we were with them and we appreciated their progress. Mm-hmm. I was invited many times to open AA meetings. The first one I went to was when I just started as a misdemeanor drug court judge. I had never been, there would be no reason for me to go to an AA meeting. I wasn't addicted to drugs. I can't tell you that I never used stuff growing up in the 60s, but it never became a problem for me. And I went into these meetings and I saw people that I knew. And I'm wondering to myself, do they think I'm here? I was there to learn about this and what goes on at these meetings. And I'm looking, I didn't know he was addicted. I didn't know she was addicted. And I'm thinking to myself, they're thinking the same thing about me, right? But what was nice is that later on people would invite me to a celebratory AA meetings when they were going to get a coin, a 6-month coin or a year coin, and they wanted me to be there to share that with them. And it was, to me, that was very rewarding that they recognized that I was part of their recovery.
You very eloquently speak about your family in here. You talk about a nephew that was addicted, has an addiction, and he's 10 years clean. And you actually spoke, I think the quote you used was, it's an equal opportunity disease.
Unfortunately, yes. When I first started, I thought that drug addiction was only confined to the minority communities, people of color or people that were poor. And when I first started the drug court here, Jewish kids from Clarkstown? How does this happen? And I thought about it, and I thought about what Jews go through during Passover, studying the Passover story about the last what was it, plague, which was the slaying of the firstborn, right? The Pharaoh wasn't motivated enough to free the Jews to leave Egypt. They came up with the slaying of the firstborn. If that doesn't work, I don't know what's going to work, right? And so, how did Jews protect themselves? They put lamb's blood on the doorposts of their homes, and so the angel of death would pass over their homes. That's how the word came to be. And so my view of addiction was that there's no lamb's blood that's going to stop the angel of death from coming to anybody's home. And it's in everyone's community. But truthfully, the only time we started paying attention to this terrible epidemic when it became part of the white middle class families. In Staten Island, when kids were dying of overdoses, all of a sudden we have to do something about it. When it was in the minority community, very, very little was done, and that's a terrible stain on us.
No, it really is. But thankfully, someone such as yourself and countless other judges like you made a career out of helping others. And I love the title of your book, Social Worker with the 2x4. Maybe you could just expound upon.
Well, I was interviewed. I guess it was when I was a misdemeanor level drug court judge. And I forget, I think it was the Law Journal interviewed me, and they asked me how I viewed myself as a drug court judge. And by then I had probably been a year into it. And I said, I view myself as a social worker with a 2x4. And every once in a while I have to hit them upside the head to get their attention about what's going to happen to them, either jail, prison, or death. And that's how I came up with the title, and the publisher told me that they were trying every which way to get that 2x4 in there, and they thought of Lady Justice holding the scales of justice with one hand and a sword in the other one, and they just substituted the piece of wood for the sword. It was ingenious. It really helped focus on what I was trying to say about what a drug court judge does. And very much like raising kids. I was lucky. I still am. I have two great sons and a grandson now who takes after his father. It's definitely his father's son. You raise children, and sometimes you make mistakes. Sometimes you do the right thing. You don't know whether to be hard on them or be soft on them. And it's very much like how we treat the people in drug court. Individually, like you may have more than one child. You think that your second child or your third child is going to be just like the siblings before them, but rarely are they. They're different people, even though they come from the same parents, right? And the same thing with the participants in drug court. It's an individual thing. You have to know who you're talking to. You have to know their backgrounds. You have to know how far to push them and when to let up a little bit. And it's your team that helps you. And I didn't talk about the team yet, which is the key to a functioning drug court. We have a representative from the district attorney. We have the public defender. Sometimes they have private counsel, but most time it's the public defender, excuse me. We have a treatment person on the team. We have a probation officer, a social worker that was on my team, police presence on the team when we can. It's not easy all the time to get police officers designated, but we did have help in Clarkstown, and we did have help in Haverstraw as well. The team helps the judge. They're the ones that interview the participants every week. Police officers are out in the community. They know what's going on. If they'll help do home visits, which is really what's necessary. We want to see how they're living at home. We want to see what kinds of things they have in the home. But the team concept, the social workers on the team would tell me what's new with them. Did they have a baby? Are they seeing somebody? Did they get married? Did their mother-in-law pass away? Whatever it was that would provoke a conversation, and that was the key in the judge's role. You have to make a connection with the participant. They have to know that what to say, how to say it, and the relationship between a judge and the participant is really the strongest relationship that there is in drug court.
No, absolutely, and I think somewhere around page 90 or so in your book, you actually speak about that and how the research has actually demonstrated that the degree that folks are successful is to the degree that there's really a positive or good relationship with the judge and the participant. And it's got to be tricky because as a judge, there's a reason you go into, it's kind of like a church or a temple or a synagogue, the sanctuary is elevated, the judge is elevated. You go into court, he's elevated. He's going to dispense, he or she is going to dispense justice. Mm-hmm. And it can make you more remote, it can make you more unapproachable. It's by design, but how did you bridge that divide? Because here you are a judge that you're elevated, the everything about it, all the trappings, all rise when you walk in, right. You sit down, everything revolves around your action and your efforts, but really it's developing a dynamic relationship between the person in drug court. And to a lot of people watching this, they're first of all, most people are going to be like, they never even knew drug court existed, right. And it's existed this long, number one. But even more importantly, this is like a paradigm shift. Right. How did you develop that? And because your book, and there's a couple other people I want to reference in the book, but talks about the relationship with a lot of these folks that you develop relationships mm-hmm. with, where you change their lives, or the process changed their lives, and you were a big part of that. How did you get to that? How did you bridge that gap?
Well, first of all, there was training that I took about 6 months into my tenure in Haverstraw at the National Judicial College, which was very helpful, especially after doing it for 6 months. You got an idea of what you're supposed to do, and you had an idea from them of what you're not supposed to do. And so that was helpful. I was, when I left, a few years after I left misdemeanor drug court because it became part of county court, I was appointed to the faculty of the National Drug Court Institute, where I attended trainings as a faculty member, but at the same time I attended all of the trainings that everybody else in all the other disciplines. So I learned quite a bit. As much as I gave, I received as far as training is concerned. And it's really like raising kids. It really is. And you have to know them. You have to get to know them. They have to open up to you a little bit. And you use some techniques to try to do that, and that's where your team comes into play. They will tell you things that they rarely tell me. But, for example, some of them were abused as kids. I would not go near there. I didn't have to know what it was. I had to know what to stay away from. What was important is that I knew about it. I didn't have to talk about it with them, unless, like this one person did, blurting it out. That was not the norm. Most people kept it private. And whatever it was, if it was football season, and somebody walked in with a Ohio State sweatshirt, they knew exactly that I was a Wolverine fan. And so we started a conversation about it. It wasn't, you're not going to wear that again. I would tease them, you want to try something? Wear a Michigan State sweatshirt. And I still haven't gotten over the other night. But anything that we could start a conversation of. I heard your mom was not doing well. Listen, I'm sure your mom wants you to succeed here, so you need to go to more meetings. Not throw them off because your mom needs you. You need to find somebody else to help your mom while you go to a meeting, because your mom is not going to be happy if you relapse. And anything to start a conversation. And sometimes it was not easy, because people come up, especially in the beginning, and they don't know what to expect. They know that they pled in. They know that I have power over them to send them to jail or prison. But they don't know really how this is going. And the longer they're there, after a couple of sessions of watching people come up and talk about their week, or my asking them what was going on in treatment, how long have you been clean. When they first come up, I would ask them what kind of drug they're addicted to, or drugs, how long they've been using, and what did they expect out of the program. And in the beginning, they would say, I want my charges reduced. That was their end game. That's how we got them in, with that hook. And that was fine. I didn't mind them saying that early on. But as they understood what they were going through, and sometimes you could actually see the light bulb, the figurative light bulb go on, where they weren't resistant anymore. They were compliant, and they were doing the things that they were supposed to do. And they were helping others, which was, when you're in this business, in the recovery business, you're supposed to do that. You're supposed to move it on to somebody else. You're supposed to sponsor people and so on. And when you see some of our graduates who went into this work, one of them at Nyack Hospital now, and others who went into being case managers for different treatment agencies, they've found recovery. That's the key. But getting them to show themselves a little bit, that was the challenge. And you just use some techniques, whatever you can find, whatever your team is going to tell you, sooner or later they will open up. And then they're not as nervous coming up. Right. They're happy to come up. They're happy to tell you, oh, I had a great week, I got a promotion, or whatever it was. I was daddy. And the same way that they didn't want to admit that they used. Yeah. And so we would find out, from a drug test that they used, and we would give them a chance to own up to it. Not when they came to court. It was already too late for that. But if they had told the person taking the test, you don't even have to test me, I'm going to be dirty, something happened, I broke up with my girlfriend, boyfriend, my mother was giving me a hard time, whatever the reason was, I used. And then nothing would happen to them if they did that. That was something we debated about, whether we should punish them just for the use. And I said, no, we're not going to punish them for the use. They're addicts. They may relapse. That's not the point. Without honesty, they can't be recovery. And so we're not going to punish them if they come clean. And some of my team members would say, oh, all they're going to do is use and tell you. And I said, no, they're not going to do that, because I'm daddy. And who's the person in your life when you were young who you never wanted to, you'd rather lie to your parents rather than watch the disappointment on their face when you had to tell them that something happened at school or whatever the negative thing was, to watch the disappointment on your parents' face. They didn't want to go through that. And so they would lie to me so that they wouldn't see the disappointment. It's a crazy paradigm, but that's what they would do. But sooner or later, most of them became honest. If they relapsed, they told me, because we would change their treatment, we would increase their treatment, but they wouldn't see jail for their honesty.
Yeah, Mitch is one of the stories in the book, and Mitch, writes a letter which is incorporated in the book as part of his story, and he talks about how grateful he was, like he had relapsed, he had fallen, and he wasn't terminated, but he knew he was going to be punished, but he was grateful for that and how that changed his life. So it really speaks to the relationship that he developed with the team members and with you. And there was a consequence, obviously. You had the ability to sentence him, to some significant jail time, but he wasn't terminated from the program, which is very powerful. And this book is chock full of those stories. There's a couple of folks that come up, and you referenced early on in the book about how you're in a supermarket, you're in a public place, and somebody comes up, and maybe share a little bit about what that experience is.
Rockland's a small county, and you go to the mall on a weekend, you're bound to run into people that you know. And in my other world as a judge, there were some people that I would not greet or come up to. I would walk the other way. But with drug court people, if I saw them alone, I would come up to them and I would not ignore them and not walk the other way. But if they were with somebody, then I would be kind of careful and I would wait, because I didn't know if that other person knew what was going on. And there's a whole lot of confidentiality that comes with being in drug court. You just can't tell everybody. I changed the names of the people that in the book. And so I would wait to get a sign from them, and more often than not, they would come up to me with whoever they were with and introduce me to them, if it was their parents or whatever. Interestingly, at the book signing, I may be rambling because I'm old, but when I get something in my head, I want to say it before I know I'm going to forget it. At the book signing a few weeks ago, there were a couple who came over to me. They were first people that were there. I didn't remember them, but their daughter was in drug court. And they came to get the book. They also came to thank me. And the daughter was pregnant when she came into drug court. And having pregnant women in drug court is important. They keep statistics about drug-free babies. It's very important because if anybody's ever worked in a hospital and watched a baby go through withdrawal, it's heartbreaking. And so when there's someone in drug court that's going to give birth to a child, you want to make every effort for that person to stay clean while they're pregnant. And so they showed me a picture of their daughter and their granddaughter, who's now, I think, 6 or 7 years old. It goes back a few years. And what I used to do was I used to invite, she used to bring the child, the baby, to court. And at that time I was grandfather deprived. My son and daughter-in-law were not cooperating yet. Finally they did. And I would say, all right, come on up here, only on one condition: I get to hold the baby. This was before COVID and all the rest. And so I would hold the baby while we had the conversation. And that shows people, that you're a human being. You might be elevated, you might, have an important position, you might have their future in your hand, but still in all, you're a human being, and you want them to succeed. And that's the effort that the judge has to show, that we want you to proceed. We're going to do everything we can to help you, but you have to help yourself. You have to be invested too, or else it can't work.
So Judge, let's bring this full circle now. So you're working for a great district attorney now, Judge Walsh. I think it's no secret that, many years ago, Judge Meehan was a great district attorney, and I think having a district attorney who's also a judge brings a whole different insight as well to the job. And I think already in just less than a year, Tom Walsh and his team have really kind of put a stamp on the DA's office. So let's bring it full circle now. So you're out of retirement, you're back in as the first assistant district attorney, and alternatives incarceration. Let's talk a little bit about that, because we've been talking about drug court and your book, but really drug court is really an alternative to an incarceration type program. Can you talk a little bit about some of the programs that the DA's office is involved with, and some of the things that are coming in the future?
Well, obviously misdemeanor drug court and felony drug court, those were the keystones. But we do have other programs. For example, we have a program specializing in veterans. And we try to match someone who is a veteran with someone going through that veterans program. We use, I think, Montrose as the treatment agency, but also we can use any treatment agency. We try to make the veteran comfortable, and that's why we try to pick someone who doesn't have to be someone in recovery, but it could be, that can speak the same language as a veteran. I mean, I'm a veteran, but not I didn't see any kind of real action, but the 4 or 5 months that I spent in basic training did change my life. It did give me a lot of discipline that I needed at the time. But with this program, we've had a lot of success. I had someone who graduated from the program come to my door, not knowing that I was going to open the door. It's not in the book. We needed a transportation, to go to and from the airport. And all of a sudden, I opened the door, and that's him. And I didn't remember him. And he says, "Judge, yeah, I'm so-and-so." He now has a fleet of cars. He's really a great success story, and a veteran of Iraq. He went through a lot. And so veterans, especially combat veterans, go through a great deal. We missed the boat when the Vietnam veterans came back, a lot of them drug addicted and so on. We didn't treat them the way they should have been treated. So that's one program. We also have a program for chemically addicted and mentally impaired, and that's a program where we treat both. Now, most of the time there's an underlying mental illness, generally for less serious depression, possibly bipolar, but when the mental illness is much worse than the addiction, when they're just using drugs to treat their mental illness, but it's the mental illness that's causing it, then we have this special program for those kinds of folks. So we treat both at the same time. In drug courts, we treat whatever underlying mental illness there is too, once we know about it. There's also a program called DTAP where we send people away. The addiction is so difficult and so long in time that we feel the need to send them into inpatient, and they go in inpatient for about 9 months. And then they come back to the community for about 3 months in a halfway house and so on. So that's reserved for the most addicted kinds of people, the most seriously ill people. And as far as there's another program that's fairly new, and it was developed by Judy Rosenthal in our office as director of programs, and someone who was my first drug court coordinator in the misdemeanor court, for intellectually impaired people. And it's a different kind of program because those folks, people with traumatic brain injuries, they're not going to get better because their issues are such that they can only reach a certain level. And so they have to be treated a little differently. And they use different techniques to help those people. It's called IDATI, and it's been replicated in a number of other communities and recognized by the Department of Justice as well. So that's a very innovative program to deal with those kinds of folks who are out there, and they generally want to be social, and unfortunately sometimes they're taken advantage of by their peers. Go out and get this drug for me, you know, and they're the ones that have it on them when they get arrested. So we have that program as well, and there are new things on the horizon. Something that we applied for this past year, and Nita Lowy helped push it through. One of the last things probably she's going to do because she's leaving office. It's a LEAD program that's all over the country. It's in the city of New York as well. It's a program, a diversion program, where we get people arrested for minor misdemeanors, criminal possession of a seventh, which is a misdemeanor of drugs, criminal trespass, criminal forgery, and so on. And the way it would work is that, and it's going to start in the town of Clarkstown first. We're going to roll it out there, hopefully sometime after the first of the year when we have contracts to do, we have training of your police department to do. Police officer would have a list of questions to ask this person that would convince them to go to the next step, that they might have a drug or alcohol problem by the answers that this person gives. And the police officer would then call a recovery coach from Rockland Council on Alcoholism, who would go to the police station, talk with, now a recovery coach is a recovering addict, but non-using, and would be able to, again, speak the same language, tell them about the program, tell them if they make meaningful efforts towards treatment, that the case will never see the light of day. And then if they're willing to go forward, we have DATOP standing by that will do a Zoom evaluation of them right in the police station, and then decide on what kind of treatment plan based on what they've been told about their history and so on. And if the person just signs on for the first step, those charges will not see the light of day. And if they choose not to, we have someone who we're going to follow in the system that might be someone that goes into the misdemeanor drug court later on, right. If they're looking for help and they're willing to do something to help themselves. That has been this program, this LEAD program, and I don't know what we're going to call it. They call it Project Hope in the City. I want to use a different name, come up with a different name, but the program has been very successful in getting people at the earliest stages and try to divert them from the criminal justice system and get them the help they need. We also are a participant with Hope Not Handcuffs, which is, I think, in Clarkstown as well as other police agencies. That's not an easy program because you're sitting in the police station, or the police station will call you when someone comes in. Very rarely does a mom or a dad feel comfortable bringing their child into the police station to try to get help. Parents, unfortunately, are part of the problem sometimes in getting young people help, because they know they don't want to bring them into the system. They're afraid of what's going to happen to them. They're afraid of them ending up in jail or prison. But they should be more afraid of having to plan for their funerals.
We've had far too many situations like that where, you know, without sharing names, but we had one family in the town where both of the children died of overdoses within 18 months of each other.
It is a terrible problem, and I see the statistics every week. We have we get the statistics from all over the county. We're not going to exceed, it doesn't look like we're going to exceed the overdoses that we had in 2019. But we've definitely met and will exceed the resuscitations that we had from Narcan. It's a great drug if someone is unconscious and they're there in time to give it to them. A lot of parents have it because they're worried about their kid's addiction, and it's not difficult to administer, all police officers have it with them, all ambulance corps have it with them. But it's allowed people to keep trying.
Right.
That's the negative part of it. The same way we passed a law a few years ago about reporting, doctors having to report the scripts that they have, and made it much more difficult for people to get scripts for pills. And so what happened? They bought it. They started buying it on the black market, right? And drove people to using and to heroin, and now heroin laced with fentanyl.
Right.
So everything that we can do that we think is helpful sometimes is not as helpful as we planned. And Narcan is one of those things that saves lives, but gives another opportunity for that addict to do it again. And maybe Narcan is not going to be there again for them. You can't bring people back from the dead.
Right.
You can do it when they're unconscious, but if they're dead, they're dead. And unfortunately, all too many. 60,000 people died of overdoses in this country in 2019. And so when this epidemic continues, and sometimes worse because of people not being able to get out and being stuck in their homes and being depressed, and liquor stores seem to be an essential service, right? So, and that's where it starts.
Judge, this has been just such a wonderful opportunity, really shed some light on a unique aspect of treatment. You know, I worked in the not-for-profit sector for about 21 years. I'd worked with the DA's office when I was the CEO at RILC, now Bridges, with the reentry program, but we had done a lot of work in recovery. I was on the National Committee for National Recovery Month through a couple of different federal agencies that organize that each year. And one of the folks that I used to work with through that really talked about the recovery process. And he tried to talk about his agency, where he said their motto really became where recovery is the expectation and hope meets you at the door. Right. And I would really kind of echo drug court, you know, really was kind of that motto. It was a paradigm shift. And you were there early on, 2000 to 2002, and then the chief judge made a decision to kind of move that you know, up a court, and then eventually when you became county court and then acting Supreme Court judge, you were able then to go back to it, and you changed countless lives because of it. And a lot of people need to know this story because they need to know what the resources are that are out there, and they need to know that recovery is the expectation, and hope can meet you at the door if people really have the keys to it. And drug court and your efforts has been one of them. And now you're back, you know, you're back in the DA's office, and you're bringing your own wisdom to, you know, to that office to continue to bring these good things forward. So we thank you for that.
I have one other story that just came to my attention last night when I had a message from a drug court graduate. I mentioned him in the book, but I didn't know about this part of the story, and he just told me about it last night. My son had moved from Nyack to Suffern to an apartment building, and I was helping him move. Basically, I was holding the door. He was moving the packages, and out comes this person, and in drug court. He was still in drug court, and shock on his face. "What are you doing here?" he said to me, and I said, "Checking up on you." Just and then I introduced him to my son, and they became neighbors. They knew each other in the building, and but he didn't tell me what was going on with him right before he met me that afternoon. He said he was invited out by some friends to go to a bar, and he didn't want to go, and he was appealing to his higher power to help me make a decision as to whether I should do this or not. I don't want to do it, but I need help, right? And then I come along, and that was the sign. And I said to him, "Why didn't you tell me this earlier, I would have put it in the book,
Yeah.
because it's a great story.
Yeah.
It just happened. Stuff happens. You just don't know why.
Yeah, and it's so often true is the case, in somebody's recovery. I mean, something that you may just take for granted or is incidental really can become something that becomes, a real plank in the floor that kind of supports somebody at a point when they don't realize that. I heard the story. I was working with some folks years ago, and it was the laughter of someone else's child in the next apartment. And it finally became that moment of insight for this woman who had lost her kids because of her addiction. And she finally, she said all the stuff, but at that moment of absolute despair, when she was thinking of killing herself, and she heard that a mother and a kid laughing through the wall, and she said, "I'm gonna get clean, no matter what I have to do." And it became that first moment of clarity that she had in probably 2 years. And it was the start of her moving forward, and eventually she was reunited with her kids.
That's a book that we used in drug court named Moments of Clarity.
Yeah.
And it was written by Christopher Kennedy Lawford, who was an actor and the son of Peter Lawford and the Kennedy sister. Forgot which one. And he wrote this book interviewing these very public people. And I used to read pieces of that book in drug court to them, how they got their moment of clarity, what they went through to get to that point where they decided they had enough. And it's a very interesting book. I recommend it to every drug court judge I meet, because you get an idea of what this process is. It's not, they wake up one day. It's stuff that happens to them. And it could be what you were saying about just listening to someone next door with a child laughing. It's all it takes. It's just the brain, there's a switch that goes off in the brain, and they're on their way.
So, Judge, the book is Social Worker with a 2x4. Where can people get it?
They can get it at store.bookbaby.com, which is the publisher, or on Amazon Books by either putting in the title or my name, and they can find it. And it goes in e-books as well.
And you also had it, I would imagine there's some local bookstores as well. There was a book signing down at Books and Greetings in
Northville.
Northville,
They have
New
some.
Jersey.
They have some, yeah. In
Great.
fact, they asked me for some more, which
Yeah.
that was great.
That's a great store. I go there a lot. They have a lot of book signings. So no, I wasn't able to make your book signing, but was able to get your book.
Yeah.
And thank you for signing it as well, Judge. I'm so happy that we have had you in on this. Because I think it's such a unique story. And once I saw the book and I started to read it, and just some great stories, some great nuggets of truth, and people need to know what some of the resources are. So thank you for the courage in telling your own story, and thank you for your efforts in really changing lives as a judge.
Thank you for having me here today. Appreciate it.
Stay tuned. We'll be right back.